Hey everybody, it's Bruno. Here's my new episode of MB. Be my next guest on MB by clicking on the link below and we'll contact you. So listen, enjoy the episode.
That's right. What's up, you sucker?
All right, everybody, it's Bruno and I'm really happy. I'm jacked to have my good friend Mario Toneguzzi. We kind of, on MB, this is our little program where we have a little bit of fun, but we are serious. The reason why I'm kind of happy about this is the roles are reversed.
I know.
Have you ever been interviewed before, Mario?
You know, a couple of times on radio.
Other than the police?
Yeah. Yeah, the wanted sign in the police station. But no, I have a couple of times, and it is totally different being on the other side, not me asking questions.
So none of this is scripted.
Okay, throw it out. I got to throw my thing out.
No, but we did not script it.
No.
And we've been wanting to do this for a long time, and we just released the MB series, and I'm pretty happy. But first and foremost, Mario, you've been out here in Calgary for a long time, the voice of every business out there. Humble beginnings. Tell us about it.
Oh boy, humble beginnings. Comes from Ottawa. Kid goes to Carleton University and graduates with journalism degree and moves west.
So Carleton University, that's where the K stands for quality.
Oh gosh, home of the Ravens, the Ravens' nest.
Coming from an Ottawa UG.
Great, yeah, it was a great pub in there, the Ravens pub. But I moved out west and was in Nelson, BC for a year and a half, and then I moved to Calgary, October 1980. And you know what's really interesting about that time is when I first moved to Calgary, the Calgary Herald had a downtown office building, like right downtown. And behind it was an old hotel called the Empress Hotel. Mm. And I was staying there for a week before I found an apartment. Well, the very first morning, I went downstairs for breakfast. And everybody, very first day in Calgary, everybody downstairs wearing a ball cap in the diner, and they're all cursing and swearing a storm, like unbelievable. I'm going, what the hell is going on? They were cursing the Liberals, they were cursing the federal government, they were cursing Trudeau, etc.
The father.
The father Trudeau. You fast forward years later, I'm looking in the Calgary Herald and looking at a business story, and the business story says, October 28th, 1980, the federal Liberals under Marc Lalonde and Pierre Elliott Trudeau introduced the National Energy Program, which led to economic chaos in the province and in the city. But at that time, I had no clue what I was getting into. And as an aside, my boss, who was from Winnipeg, told me specifically, he says, don't advertise the fact that you're from Ottawa. And for God's sake, he says, do not even tell people that you actually like Trudeau and the Liberals. Because at that time I did.
Oh my God,
at that time.
So we've converted you.
I've been converted a long time ago, trust me.
There you go. And remember, this isn't a newscast. I have fun on these things, so you can say whatever you want. Okay. So, and you never went back. So Calgary's home.
Calgary is definitely home. I think, to be quite honest, though, my first couple of years in Calgary, I did not like it at all. And I think most of it was being homesick. And Calgary at that time was just crazy downtown. But I tried for a couple of years to get back to Ottawa. But I remember going out for a couple of drinks with an old professor of mine, actually my thesis advisor. And when I told him that I don't know if I want to stay in Calgary, and he just reamed me out. And he said, Mario, you stay at the Calgary Herald for 5 years and you can go anywhere you want after that. Well, I did stay for 5 years, but it ended up being, it's 40 years, actually 40 years. Can you believe that? 40 years this fall.
Interesting, Mario, here's an interesting fact that years later, we didn't actually know each other in Ottawa. And because you went away when I was still pretty young, because you're much older than I am.
Much more mature.
Well, yeah, you do that too. But interestingly enough, for our viewers, is that my father owned a service station in Ottawa, and I used to fill up your dad's car
Yeah, I know.
all the time. And
Yeah.
and your brother, I got to know his name is Bruno too.
Yeah.
And so my father knew your dad quite well. And then years later, here's a true story. Not that anything else isn't true, but true story is that my father used to say, you got to get in touch with Mr. Toneguzzi's son. But I viewed Mario as like this big shot
Gosh.
in the Herald. I mean, you absolutely changed businesses by writing an article. And I wasn't intimidated, but I was also saying I didn't want a freebie kind of thing. I wanted to earn it my way. And years later, we met. And I don't know, there's never a day that doesn't go by that we don't talk to each other.
True.
But yeah, your father was an amazing, amazing person. And what do you remember most about your dad?
Oh my gosh, I could go on for hours and days talking about being eccentric. He was really eccentric with everything he did, and he was funny that way. But the guy loved to make his sausages, loved to make his grappa, loved to his garden. You know what? And he, when he retired, it was funny because when he retired, you know, most of those guys at that age, they just can't just sit around and do nothing, or they're not, you know, the old Italian guys, they're not real snowbirds. They don't go anywhere. They stay at home or whatever.
Snowbirds, they go to the basement,
Yeah.
the cantina.
Yeah, the cantina. But he used to volunteer at a place called Nicastro's, which was a food market in Ottawa, very well-known Italian market. But he was basically working there full time. But they treated him well. You know, they just gave him a lot of food and stuff. But he passed the time, and he really enjoyed that. But yeah, he had his eccentric ways of doing things and thinking about things.
What is the one thing that makes you, keep wanting to stay in Calgary?
Oh boy.
Because you've had many times, many opportunities to escape, especially through your profession.
Yeah, true. I think it's just the opportunity. I think, there is, granted, we're going through one heck of a time right now, a double whammy with the pandemic and with the oil prices. But I always think that Calgary has always been like the land of opportunity. I think there's that, and maybe it's an overuse and a cliche about the entrepreneurial spirit here in Alberta, but it's so true. Like, people get things done here. It's not a, I hope nobody slams me about this from Edmonton and Ottawa, but
that's
it's
all right.
not
If you get dislikes, it counts.
It's not a government town where a lot of things are handed to you, right? You have to go out there and you work at it and you get things done. And I think that's always the thing that I really enjoyed about Calgary is that entrepreneurial spirit.
Mario, you've put so many companies on the map. You may not think so, you might not reflect on that, but even today, when you mention a company, it gets attention. But right now, in the last, 5-6 years, we were talking about this off camera. The cost of advertising on platforms, it's out of control. So, what are some of the things that companies can do to really kind of blow it up for themselves?
Well, I think they need to talk to people like myself, like yourself, and what we're doing at MegaPixx Media, to give them different offerings and options on, the key thing these days is you can't expect to run a business and just sit there and just hope that people will come. Like, you build a field and they'll come type thing. You have to be aggressive, and you have to get out there and tell people. You're going to shout out, what you do and who you are, right? And so it's important that you share your message and most importantly, tell your story. And I think that's the key for businesses these days. You got to tell your story. People have got to connect with you on a personal level to understand who you are and especially why you're doing what you're doing, right? And I think not as a slam to the mainstream media or whatever, but some of this, the advertising and costs are pretty, expensive.
Oh, they're out of control.
You know, for
have
small,
been for
small
years.
businesses,
Yeah.
right? You're a small business owner with maybe 2 or 3 people on staff or whatever, even 100 people on staff, and you know, this is quite expensive for you, right? So, you know, what we're doing at MegaPixx Media with our video series, for example, as our kind of flagship offering, is we're giving people that option of taking something that's effective and cost effective and helping them tell their story to help them drive, you know, their business. And beyond that, what we do, I think that's important, I think any business should do, is that we drive all that through our social media. And heck, if businesses aren't on social media, they're going to be left in the dust.
Well, you know what's funny is because you know, ever since we really connected and reconnected, you are, and take it the way you want, Mario. We, as business owners, I believe you got to do things differently.
Yeah.
And you know what's different 10 years ago when social media was affordable? I don't think it's as affordable as it was. Well, first of all, I know I'm playing silly. And Mario, since I met you, you're willing to do things differently than other journalists. Point in fact that we collaborate quite a bit in MegaPixx.
Yeah.
And look, we're here. We're shooting the breeze.
Yeah.
And all it is to really encourage companies to say, look at other platforms. If it's not us, it doesn't matter. But look at other avenues other than traditional ways that really is complete speculation with your money.
Well, you know, you gotta understand. Okay, first of all, if you're a business owner, you don't have the time to do this other stuff and the social media stuff. You just don't, right? All your time is being spent on running your business and doing that well, etc. So, you know, and not a knock here, but I think what happens is when business owners finally decide, hey, I've got to do social media, etc. Okay, they usually end up hiring young kids. Okay, granted, they may know the mechanics and all the analytics and metrics and all that stuff about social media. But what they lack is the one key thing, which is the key driver to everything, is content. So you've got to understand what content works and start from that as a base. And I think that's what, you know, spent my whole life telling stories, right? And that's where I come in on this and believe strongly that you got to get the content first, you got to get it right, and then the social media supports that.
What's really fascinating to me in the last, you know, several years in business, when people say, you know what, I want to start a marketing campaign, and they say, to your point, I really enjoy working with young people because it keeps us kind of younger.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair for them because they understand the technologies. And I always say this, they are they're social media users, but not necessarily do they know how to work the back end. And that's where people like you come in. And it is a true art to tell a story through print or through digital. I know that one person came up to us and said, you know, we're going to hire a firm to do all these tactics. And they all come up, or most come up and say, you give us the content and we'll put it on. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's the hard part. What do you think when people just say, you know, I'll come up with content? What's the warning for people in business?
Well, I guess, my warning is that the content has to be authentic, it has to be genuine, it has to be content that people are obviously interested in, because what's the point of putting out content if you don't have any readers or audience that want to see that content, right? So that's the key, is you got to have targeted content that's of interest to people. But also, I think more importantly, the content has to kind of walk the line between being promotional in one sense and just like a straight story, right? And I think what goes wrong, I think, with a lot of companies and a lot of marketing campaigns, et cetera, it becomes way too corporate. And corporate speak, corporate lingo, all that type of stuff, where it becomes blatant advertising, and people would get turned off by that, right? As opposed to being a story that people would be interested in following through and reading or listening to.
Right. You know, somebody once told me, a crisis management expert, I'll throw her name out, Melissa Agnes, and she has a podcast. You guys want to check it out. She's really good. You know, would you, as a company owner, big or small, would you trust your brand to a marketing firm or whatever in all conditions? So how do they manage a crisis, you know? And basically, I thought of that. It's been over a year. I've been thinking about that because, you know, I obsess over things. And I'm thinking, even not in crisis situations, would I actually trust anybody with my story? Not to say put it out there. Like once you have your story, you hire somebody to put it out in the media. But what if they get our story wrong? What happens in a crisis situation where somebody's going to sue you or something?
Well, it's a good question. I guess it depends on what relationship that you have with.
They better know your company.
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Like if you're going out to the media and expecting a news story, for example, well then everything's fair game, and you don't know, and you have no control over what actually appears in print or what actually appears on TV or in radio. So that's kind of like rolling the dice, right? You're interviewed by, I won't say the name of the paper, but saying you're interviewed by a newspaper, and you're waiting to see, what's that going to look like? What's the story going to say about me, right? And so that can be a tricky situation. It could be a very anxious one for you. If you're going out, however, and looking at sponsored or paid content, well, that's something that you're involved in, and you tell your story, and it's everything that gets out comes from what you want to say, right? A type thing. So there's two avenues there to go through, right? And but when you talk about crisis, that's the one thing that I see all the time with companies. No matter what happens, boy, you better not hide. You had a crisis. The worst thing you can do is hide. Right. You got to be upfront, and you've got to acknowledge if you made a mistake. You got to acknowledge make the mistake. You've got to be saying you're sorry, and then you've got to tell people, okay, what are you going to do to rectify something, right? Yeah. But for God's sake, don't hide.
Yeah. Mario, you've been through it all. You've been a journalist, you've been a beat writer, sports, business, you name it. What do you make of how the press, firstly, is being treated in the sense of a good friend, Donald Trump? People like Donald Trump that openly, right from the podium, is that what you call it, the podium? Or
could be the podium,
whatever. Even our prime minister, they take shots at journalists and point blank call them fake news, and notwithstanding if they're making stuff up, because I believe that a lot of stuff was made up when we were kids too. We just believed it, trust me. But what do you make, first part A, what do you make of guys like Trump, guys like Trudeau that just go that hard on journalists and reporters? Hey, this is a great episode. Watch the rest of the dialogue to see what else we learned. Make sure to suggest someone you would like to be our next guest. Click below in the description and we'll make sure to contact them. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Oh boy, that's a good question. It's hard to generalize, but to be honest, I can understand where some of the frustration and some of the opinions come from. I'll just give you an example, and it comes to bias, right? And it comes to that perception that certain media are, that's obviously Trump's shtick these days, is that media is really biased against him, right? Years ago, I think it was in 1994. It was 94. I actually went to Ottawa. I went back home for a few months. My brother was getting married, so it was perfect, and I was there to cover Parliament Hill for the Herald. And the reason they sent me there is because they wanted a local journalist to cover the Reform Party at that time with Preston Manning on the Hill. And they wanted it because they wanted a sort of perhaps a more fair depiction of what the Reform Party was doing, because at that time, oh my gosh, the media in Ottawa, and I won't mention the media outlets, were so biased against the Reform Party. Here's a bunch of hicks from the prairies in Alberta, etc., and everything they did, they were slammed, boom, 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 boom. So the Herald, as I said, sent me there for a couple months to cover it and do stories on the Reform Party that were, quote, unbiased, so to speak. So it's there. It's been there all the time. There is bias in the media. It's just how blatant does it become, right? And I can tell right now how many people look at a certain network out there and talk about how biased it is towards the federal government and Trudeau and the Liberal Party. And but those are perceptions out there. And once you get a perception, it's hard to get out of it, right? It's extremely hard to get out of it. And again, I'm just, as I said, preface these comments before about it's hard to generalize. Let's not forget that there's a ton of journalists and media out there that, do their job and do it in a fair way. And so you just have to remember that as well.
So on the flip side, what are journalists doing these days and reporters doing to get called out, like so openly and blatantly and almost disrespectfully? Is it fake news? Like, are they just throwing out fake news to be so they become? Sometimes when I watch a press conference and we brought up Trump or something, I'm starting to think that some of these, because that's the most blatant one, right?
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that these journalists just come out and say, reporters just say something so that they can become famous. And so,
but see, I in some ways I don't like the term fake news, right? Because I really think it's very difficult for the media to the legitimate media, right? To go and undertake fake news. What you're dealing with is just different biases, different slants on things, and I don't know. You're an older enough guy to understand and remember this guy, Paul Harvey. Remember Paul Harvey?
How old do you think I am?
About a year old.
He's a hockey player.
No, not Doug Harvey. Paul Harvey was this guy on radio.
John Harvey played for the Argos. That I remember. Anyways, go ahead.
Paul Harvey was this guy on radio that used to show up and tell a story and then stop and go to a commercial break and then come back with the rest of the story, right? And I think that's the thing, right? There's always these two sides of the story, right? And if you are a good journalist and doing your job right, you're going to present both sides of that story. The problem is, I think, with some people today, the problem they find with the media is there's only that first side of the story or one side of the story that's being presented, right?
Okay, let's talk gravy.
Gravy?
Yeah, big CFL fans.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Favorite Ottawa Rough Rider. Now we're not talking
My
renting.
favorite
What are they called
Ottawa
now?
Rough Rider.
The Rouge, the red and black right now, but the Ottawa Rough Riders.
Oh my gosh! Do you know? And only people in Ottawa would get this, but we used to live in just off of Merivale Road and Clyde Avenue up in that area. And in the summertime when I was a kid, I'd get on my bike and I would go down to Lansdowne Park, downtown Ottawa, and I'd watch the summer, or not the summer, but the training camps for the Rough Riders.
Behind the south,
two a day.
South stands.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, along the, what the hell was that? Along the canal. No, it was along the canal, whatever that. Colonel By. I used to go there every day. Go in the morning, catch their morning workouts, cycle back home. My mother would have, lunch.
Prosciutto sandwich?
Yeah, something like that. Prosciutto and provolone or whatever. And then go back for the afternoon. And so like, oh gosh, the riders were like in my blood at that time. And I remember, I can't remember, I think it was 60, they won in 68. They also won in 67 in Grey Cup, I think so. But I remember 68. I remember going down on Bank Street. Bank Street is the big street in Ottawa, and there was the parade, the Grey Cup parade. I was there watching Russ Jackson, and yeah.
That was a little bit before my time, but I remember those guys.
Those are glory days.
All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, Mario. Greatest CFL player of all time, but you've had to have seen him, though.
Gosh.
You can't pick, the Babe Ruth of the CFL that you've never seen or anything.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh. You know what? That is such
And we're a little biased because we're both original Rough Rider fans.
Yeah, there's just great players out there like the Russ Jacksons of the world, but, and look in Calgary, guys like Doug Flutie, and then Edmonton, Warren Moon, and, that's almost an impossible question to answer. Like,
yeah, but I asked a hard question.
I know.
I'm like you now, right?
There's just no way
You got
I
to come
can
up with one.
pick one. Oh, my gosh.
See, I know one.
I don't know. I'll say Russ Jackson, but okay.
Okay, Russ, yeah.
How about you?
I think the greatest impact player was Johnny Rogers.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
People don't realize the impact Johnny Rogers. I grew up a good boy, right? And I worked hard with, my dad's service station, whatever. And I don't know what possessed a whole bunch of my friends, and I kind of followed them one day. I snuck away, and they were egging the Montreal Alouettes bus, over the Bank Street Bridge. And I kind of participated in it. I must say that I could throw, so I hit the bus. And the reason why Johnny Rogers was we use the word disruptor.
Yeah.
He was a complete disruptor.
Yeah.
And one of the first players ever to back it up on the field. And I remember Mario, you were there when he would score a touchdown. I vaguely remember, but I remember I was just like really, really young. And he would turn around and go backwards the last 5 yards and taunt everybody with it. And then he'd go back to the sideline and wear the mink coat and sit on his helmet and light up a cigar.
Yeah.
So I don't think we'll ever see it. I could only imagine if the internet was then back then on Johnny Rogers. But
from Nebraska.
Nebraska, Heisman Trophy winner.
Yep.
And that's who I. So greatest hockey player you've ever seen?
Oh.
You're a Habs fan.
I'm a Habs fan, or was a Habs fan.
No more?
No.
Flames fan?
You know what? No, nobody's fan now.
Nobody's
fan. you know what? I stopped cheering for the Habs during the terrible Irving Grunman years.
Oh yeah.
Where they just did stupid things, and unfortunately they went away. Geez, it may not be politically correct to say this these days, but they were known as the Flying Frenchmen, right? Yeah. Remember that? And they had those great teams, that they just skated like the wind out there. And then they changed under the Grunman era, and they got away from that, and that's when I went away. But I know you're not going to like this, but Guy Lafleur.
Guy Lafleur, oh my God. So I got to tell you a story about Guy Lafleur, is that when I was really, 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 really young, like 5, 6 years old, everybody in the neighborhood used to cheer for the Canadians. And they traded a player that later became, legendary Wally Kozak. I think he played with this guy. For I don't know what reason, I used to wear 24 or something. They traded a guy called Chuck Lefley. And he was my favorite Montreal Canadian at the time-ish.
Yeah.
And they traded him for a bag of pucks, I think, to the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I stopped cheering for them. And Bernie Parent started playing for the Flyers.
Yep.
And he was only God saves more than Bernie.
Oh, I know.
So I started cheering for the Flyers in protest. And the greatest deal I ever made, as far as I'm concerned, because I used to get the Guy Lafleur hockey card. I used to draw horns on him.
Oh gosh.
And Ken Dryden, I used to paint his mask in Flyers colors. Oh. And then I go to the park at Beach Park, and the greatest deal I ever made is I gave away, which is really hard to find, Ken Dryden's, a couple of Ken Dryden's, Guy Lafleur, all these great hockey guys from Montreal that I had for a Chuck Lefley St. Louis card. So that was an incredible time. especially Ottawa was a
what?
tweener city, right? So
You know what? I was when I was in Montreal in March. Yeah, it was in March, right? I was visiting my daughter, and I had seen her in Montreal a couple of times, and then I realized, geez, I'd miss going to the Forum. And she said, well, geez, it's not far away from where we are. Like, and so my last trip to Montreal in March, I walked into the old Forum off St. Catherine, right? And
it's crazy.
and in the kind of, it's like, I don't know if it's like a retail office building now. And you walk in, and in the area, center ice with the Habs sign, with the C. And I'm just standing in the middle of it, and I'm getting freaking goosebumps now talking about it. I literally cried. My kids are looking at me going, what the hell's wrong with them?
Yeah.
I literally cried, just standing there. Yeah.
Well, it brings back so many memories of, that was the game back then. And I was saying Ottawa was a tweener town because it was in between Montreal and Toronto. It still is, but they didn't have a national hockey team.
No.
And so either you cheered really hard for the Habs or you
it was one or the other.
Cried a lot because you're a Leafs fan.
Yeah.
And it was a magical time, I think. And I was thinking back that the 70s, if you look back at the 70s, what a incredible time to be in that corridor, because that's kind of your time before you moved out here. But you remember the Riders would win. The Habs never lost.
Oh, they never lost in the early 70s, yeah.
And it was just, and the Olympics, the Olympics hit that year.
68?
76.
Oh, 76.
Yeah, the Olympics hit.
76, sorry.
And nothing could go wrong. And then all of a sudden Montreal.
I was thinking the Expo.
Expo 67. Yeah. And then all of a sudden Montreal kind of lost its cachet later on, and Toronto became the center of the universe. But they still haven't won a Stanley Cup, though.
Nope.
So
I won't for a while.
Yeah. But it certainly was a magical time.
Oh, it was. And you know what? I just, people look at what I've done, and I've done a lot in terms of different areas of coverage, right? But I always say to people, like, the sports was the best time of my life. Covering sports in this city, and when I covered sports in Calgary, it was roughly between 82 to 90, around that period. And the 80s and the mid 80s, sports in this city was just hopping. And, we had, teams like the Dinosaurs, right? The football team, the Dinos, winning Vanier Cups. We had, the university having Olympians that won gold medals, like Mark Tewksbury.
You had the Olympics here.
Yeah, we had the Olympics here. Just so much going on in the city at that time. And you know what I find really interesting, Bruno, that I run into a lot of those sports people today in what I do in terms of business coverage. And they've become successful businessmen, guys like Tony Spallettini at Spalumbo's, and Mike Palumbo at Spalumbo's. People like that, they're all over the city. But the more important thing is, not only are they successful, but they're part of the community, and they've given back and supported the community because they realize how important the community was for them when they were playing and when they were starting off in business. Yeah.
You know what? This has been great. I know we do this every day.
Okay.
Like, well, who's fooling who here, right?
Yeah.
But we thought we'd put a little fun stuff on the tape, and we're going to be back, and we're going to keep going, and maybe I'll ask you some tough questions. These were easy questions. No, anyways,
okay.
Thanks, Mario. This has been great.
Thanks a lot.
We'll come back later. All right, guys. Thanks for joining, MB. Well, you know what? That's pretty much all the time we have for this episode today. Thank you for tuning in with us. And you know what? Make sure you subscribe to our MegaPixx media channel so you will never miss an episode. And also, you can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram. We have content almost every day. So thank you